official. We're done with the first meeting, and now I will turn it back to the working group. And Ms. Cohen, you have the floor again.
Actually, it was Mr. Schaefer that had it first, and
Oh,
then
sorry.
I'll
Turn it over
pick it up after
Vice
him.
Chair. His opening remarks.
All right, the mic is mine. Thank you, Ms. Cohen, for your staff working with my staff to bring us to where we are today. We have almost 6,000 wine grape growers in California, over 4,000 wineries, 700 of which are in my district. We generate over $40 billion in sales and employ 325,000 people in the industry. It's imperative we can do everything we can to foster its success. I recognize today that we're not going to resolve all the legal issues, but hopefully we can agree upon an administrative decision. I'm committed to working with the wine industry, with the other stakeholders, with my fellow board members, and with the legislature to get the data disclosure issue resolved. However, until the legislature can act, Ms. Cohen and I would like to have the relevant data and the aggregated provided to us by zip code. I understand that can easily be done. The first step is to have our executive director review and report back to the board on the ability to disclose sales data by zip code in a manner that would protect the identity of the individual growers and the wineries. I hope this is as easy said than done. While I understand the industry would like a more specific data, I believe that using the zip code standard is a good starting point. The legislature convenes January 3rd, as we know, a few months from now. I believe we can have the bill ready for introduction as soon as the session resumes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Member Cohen, I look forward to working with the board and our stakeholders to achieve a final resolution on the tax data industry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to begin by recognizing also the importance of the wine industry as a whole to California. We were talking about world-class wineries that spread out across the entire state, including my own district and district of other board members. The California wine industry remains strong and robust, and robust economic engine for the state of California. The entire nation that only grows in size and economic impact. So what I want to do is read into the record the significant, a unique perspective of the importance that California wineries, wine grape growers, and businesses serving in the industry. First, I don't know if you knew this, I certainly didn't, this is news to me, that California is the world's 4th leading wine producer. The wine industry generates 325,000 jobs in California, which includes 6,000 farmers. The wine industry produces $57.6 billion in state economic impact. So that means the wineries are paying $15.2 billion in state and federal taxes. Wineries produce $1.36 billion in export revenue. So wineries in our wine regions generate over 23 million tourist visits and brings dollars from all over the world. So as you can see, these numbers and this data is very significant. And data is generated at every step in the winemaking process that helps to drive the industry. So it's an essential tool that helps ensure that they remain competitive, not only in California, but around the world. And the data on the wine industry provides a competitive advantage, as well as it, quite honestly, it keeps California industry growing, keeps it hungry, keeps its edge in the face of very stiff competition from other wine producers, not only in other states, but across the world. So since our last board meeting, my office has reviewed relevant information concerning the data that the Wine Institute seeks. Through discussions with the vice chair's office, stakeholders in the wine industry, and as a result of my own research, I'd like to offer a course of action that will assist us in moving forward. So first, I think that it's incumbent that I highlight that there's broad support from all parties involved, including the members of this body, that we find a solution that would provide great access to winery data. And so the solution is actually two paths. First, it's an administrative path. Okay, so that path would be to investigate the feasibility of greater availability of data on individual winery returns, provided that personally identifiable information is redacted. That's a key point. Personal identifiable information is redacted. Here is a possible administrative solution. Okay, 1. Allow the data entered in individual winery returns to be available to the public based on each winery in each unique zip code, just like Mr. Schaefer had mentioned in his remarks. For such winery returns, the name of the individual winery, the name of the taxpayer, and the taxpayer's identification would be redacted. So there wouldn't be any sharing of personal information. The only identification each winery would be the zip code in which it's located. That's pretty simple, right? If there are zip codes that contain only one winery, that information can be held from disclosure. As long as there are 2 or more wineries in a zip code, the data contained in the winery tax return couldn't be traced directly to one individual winery. So what does all this mean? It means that I believe that this would provide data considered essential to the wine industry and would go a long way as an interim solution. And so what I'd like to do is make a recommendation to the executive director to report back to the board at our next board meeting on the feasibility of this interim solution. And we have already began these conversations. I think Ms. Fleming is definitely on board and able and capable to do this. Now, the second path is probably not so simple, but a viable pathway nonetheless. It is a legislative path. Now, the legislative path would ensure that the maximum amount of data that is released will contribute to the global competitiveness of the wine industry. So what I am recommending today is that the board support, in concept, a statutory remedy that would allow the requested data to be made available to the public. I've been informed that there is a general support for this that there's general support for this from the wine industry, and there is no known opposition from wineries to date. And going forward, seeking a statutory solution would provide clarity once and for all on this very murky area. It would allow relevant data on individual wineries to be viewed without redactions. So what I'd like to do now is ask the board to support a statutory remedy to provide for greater disclosure of the data from individual wineries without redactions. And the details of such legislation can be worked out by the wine industry, by interested stakeholders, by members of the legislature, quite frankly, who understand the importance of this data to maintain the global competitiveness of California wineries. And at some point, we may want to engage our expert staff at the BOE for their suggestions. But in the meantime, we're not there just quite yet. And let's see what language the wine industry proposes. I am here to pledge the support of my office that we will continue to work with the wine industry on this statutory resolution. I'm sure that Vice Chair Schaefer's office will also join us in this endeavor. But for the moment, however, I think that the time is ripe for the board to support an in-concept statutory remedy that would allow greater disclosure of information and data from the individual wineries' tax returns. So, 2 suggestions to make the following 2 suggested actions to the board. In regard to the first motion concerning the administrative solution, I'd like to begin by reading the motion on the floor, then receive comments from the executive director as we proceed. Okay, and then I will follow up with the second motion. My first motion is very simple. My first motion is for the board to direct the executive director to report back to us at the November meeting on a possible administrative solution that allows disclosure of volume of sales data and other relevant information filed by individual wineries. And you would extract this information by the winery's zip code. That would continue to preserve the confidentiality of the individual taxpayer. Are there any comments on this first motion?
I would second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Stowers has a question.
I have comments.
Comments.
How did you come up with if it's more than 2 wineries and a zip code you won't disclose? What is that based on?
Because if it's one, just by simple process of deduction, you would be able to deduce the winery.
I absolutely agree with you on that point. I receive a lot of reports that we're pushing out to the public from the Franchise Tax Board, and they do the same thing. If it's more than X, they don't disclose, but 2 is not the number; it's more significant. So, and I'm sure they go through some type of sampling to come up with that number, and it seems like this 2 or more here is just randomly picked. So I don't know how secure that is.
Okay. Can you tell me what is what do you do with the Franchise Tax Board? If it's not 2, then
whatever number that they come up with, I don't know how they got to it, because I'm not a stats girl. But when it's something like that, they would say we're not going to report how many you say for the California Earned Income Tax Credit. We're not going to say how many in this zip code received the credit because it was less than X. So they feel like.
May I propose that the executive director come back to us? Ms. Stowers, I'm not wedded to the number. What I'm just trying to do is get the ball moving to start the conversation. So if Ms. Fleming and her team come up with a different number and a reasoning behind it, I'm ready to embrace it if it makes sense. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Fleming. Any other questions on the motion? Okay, Mr. Chair, what I suggest we do is I'm going to introduce, let me see.
Well, why don't we go ahead and take a vote on, let's take a vote on that first motion then. You want to do that?
We do, but we take public comment.
I'm sorry, Ms. Cohen, Mr. Vasquez.
Yes.
I was just processing what Ms. Cohen said, that she's not really married to the 1 or 2, and you're up to, so you're okay if staff did the analysis and decide what's the best number?
Yes.
So should you amend your motion so it reflects that?
Sure, I would be open to that. How about I introduce language that says the executive director can report back to us a suggested number for wineries? Ms. Stowers?
Okay.
Perhaps Ms. Fleming might be able to tighten up the motion then.
I didn't want to jump in there because I saw you guys thinking. I thought, okay, I'll just.
We were thinking out loud.
So, thank you, members, for this opportunity. So just, I think that is a good way to approach it, because we do have algorithms that help us to determine what is a reasonable number to contain in a zip code. And so I've got, various opinions that it could be 3, it could be 5. So it really is going to depend. And rather than get into that mathematical, discussion today, if you just revise the motion to allow us the flexibility to come back that protects the confidential data attached to a taxpayer. So back to your point, which is the PII, the personal identifiable information. So we can come back with that, give you that metric, and then it can be described in it. So I think we're fine with that. I just will note that in terms of your language, and I hate to do this to you at this late portion of the day, but because we're convening in a work group, and your work group structure suggests that you make a recommendation for it versus full motions. But unless my legal has a problem with it, we're going to allow it for today. But we'll need to clean that up to, just in terms of language, motion versus not in a work group. But for expediency for today, and I'm sorry, Ms. Cohen, I know I can explain it to you later. For expediency, right, I know it's late in the day. For expediency, I'm going to let's proceed with it today for the motion. And as long as you revise the statement on the mathematical, that just allows me to go and come up with the right metric for you. And then if you revise that to give me that flexibility as to what number of growers are in a zip code, the rest of the motion is fine. Legal's probably going to kill me later, but guys,
Well, let me restate the motion, because I actually, upon rereading it, I think it satisfies Ms. Stowers' concern. This motion is for the board to direct the executive director to report back to us in the next meeting in November on a possible administrative solution that allows disclosure of volume of sales data and other relevant information filed by individual wineries, extracted by each winery's zip code. That would continue to preserve the confidentiality of individual taxpayers. So
that's more specific. It's a question of
more specific.
Deputy Controller has no objections to that.
Okay.
I second it.
No, the question was open to Deputy Controller as to whether or not she agreed.
I'm sorry, I'm shaking my head. I'm okay with that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right,
Vice
we need to
Chair.
hurry. We only have 5 minutes and I have one more motion. Please call the vote.
Ms. Taylor, if you would please call the roll. Or do we need to take a public comment on that?
Yes.
Yes. AT&T moderator, can you please let us know if there is anyone on the line who would like to make a comment?
And again, if anybody wishes to make a comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. And we have no one in queue. Oh, actually, there's one person queuing up. Just a moment while we get their name. And just one more moment. Okay, and we'll go to the line of Tim Schmelzer. Please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, board members. Tim Schmelzer, Vice President of California State Relations for Wine Institute. Wanted to express my thanks to, particularly to board member Cohen and her staff, and also to board member Schaefer for sponsoring this effort within the working group, and wanted to express our support for this motion.
Thank you. That's the only one we had in the queue, correct?
We have no one else in queue at this time.
Thank you. With that, Ms. Taylor, if you'd please call the roll.
Chairman Vasquez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Aye.
Member Gaines,
Aye.
Member Cohen,
Aye.
Deputy Controller Stowers.
Aye.
So that's unanimous with all those present. Continue, Member Cohen.
Thank you. The second motion is for the board to support in concept a legislative solution that allows the dissemination of data and information sought by the wine industry.
I second the motion.
Objection.
You said objection or no objection?
Yes, I said objection, ma'am.
Okay.
I object to this because, if you want to know,
I do.
The filing of the wine grower's return is a voluntary self-compliance, just like so many of our tax systems, income tax, sales tax. People file the returns under the belief that their business affairs will be held confidential. As BOE administers the wine and alcohol beverage tax program, they are looking to us to protect their confidentiality. I do not think that it would be in our best interest to support legislation that's going to make it public, because we may see a reduction in self-compliance.
Okay. Are there any other thoughts? If I may respond.
It's your program.
Right? I'm trying to think. So we may see a reduction in self-compliance, but there are penalties, that are enforced, right? So it's a little bit like a carrot and a stick. There's also self-interest in reporting their tax data, because then they'll be out of compliance with the law. So this is a concept. If the concept doesn't go anywhere, or if the legislature doesn't take it up, then that's their business. But I think as the administrators of this tax program, that this is a request that has come up from our business sector, our California wine industry. I think it's incumbent upon us to explore it as far as and as possible as we can. And that's
our respect is coming from the Wine Institute with 1,000 members, and we have over more than 5,500 wine tax returns being filed. So I can't say that it's reflective of all the wine growers. And the report that the Wine Institute puts out is only made available to their members. So not all 5,500 are benefiting from their data. And they probably would expect for their tax data to remain confidential, in my opinion. And as far as there's a penalty when you don't self-comply, absolutely, there is a penalty. But studies show you that it's easier to be self-compliant, and it costs a lot less than to have a forced compliance, the so-called stick. So I'd rather keep our wine growers on the blue path of self-compliance than pushing them onto the red path of non-compliance and imposing penalties. So we can go ahead and vote, but I just wanted to have how I feel about this particular area on the record. The Institute is more than welcome to go out and ask for legislation. They have a lobbyist. They know how to do it, and what they need to change is pretty straightforward.
And so this is just a recommendation to support a concept, a legislative solution. The legislative process, better than I do. It is heavily vetted. It will be handedly debated in both chambers before it would even come out and either come for a vote. So the legislative path provides for notices of parties. I mean, this is only the beginning of a conversation.
But it's going to be led. There's going to be a conversation coming from the Board of Equalization, the organization, the agency responsible for administering that tax program. So with our seal of approval on there, it would probably go. And again, I just have problems with supporting, even in concept, legislation that's going to make taxpayers' data public when they're filing self-compliance with the impression that their business affairs is going to remain public. I think I don't think it's proper for us. I think that our role should be to administer the programs. I understand that you're elected officials and their constituents, but I think it's where we have to draw the line between advocating for constituents and industry and administering a tax program. We're walking a very fine line, and I'm, for one, am not willing to have Controller Yee walk that line with you.
Okay, that's one perspective. I appreciate
Member Cohen,
that.
I think we might have exhausted our time, so I don't know if we can even take a vote at this point since it's not on caption.
Was there a second? I think Schaefer seconded that motion.
Yes, I seconded the motion.
So we need to take public comment, and then we need to do a vote, and we can be done.
Legally, can we do that? I'm okay with it if we can.
We had public comment.
Not on this motion.
Chair Vasquez,
yes.
The captioner is continuing, so we can go ahead. AT&T moderator, could you please let us know if there is anyone on the line who would like to make a comment on this matter?
And ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to make a comment, please press 1 then 0 at this time. And we have a comment from line of Tim Schmelzer. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon again, board members. Tim Schmelzer, and we support this motion. And I think, as all the board members are aware, we would really just like to get the board back to its practice for 80 plus years as it existed before these last two. So support the motion and would gladly work with the board towards a legislative solution that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we take a vote, Member Gaines, you have your hand up. Or was that
Yeah. Thank you. I just was wondering if it seems to me that we're not saying anything in concrete here, and we could look at the language of the bill before we made any decision as to whether to support it or not. And maybe you could even look at it on a county-wide basis to provide a higher element of privacy. Just some thoughts. I think this could be worked out. I think comments that Member Stowers makes, I think, I have concern of too. We want to make sure that people's data is kept private, but if it were congregated in such a way that it'd be very difficult for someone to break out for an individual, that might be the answer, similar to what we had discussion about in the first motion. So I'd be supportive if there's that flexibility as we move forward.
Yes, that flexibility is, I mean, it's a concept. We're just shooting out ideas. This is, yes, the flexibility exists, Senator Gaines.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Taylor, if you could just call the roll.
Chairman Vasquez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Aye.
Member Gaines,
Aye.
Member Cohen,
Aye.
Deputy Controller Stowers.
No.
All right, thank you. Mr. Vasquez, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a majority on that, so that did pass. And just for the record, and then while we adjourn, now we'll adjourn this working group. But before we adjourn this, Member Cohen, did you want to put out a date for the next meeting?
Oh, the next meeting is November 6th.
16th?
I think the next board meeting. Yes.
Okay. And then before we adjourn this, I'm wondering, do we need to list the date of the next special meeting we're going to have? I guess we're talking about the work group
For the AAB.
for the AAB stuff. We should post that, no, Ms. Fleming?
But you would have to post it 10 days prior to whenever you're going to schedule and actually hold the meeting. So I think you're going to need to work that out and then determine when you'd like to have the meeting. It sounds like we need to have some discussion first and then notify us, and we can support you making sure that the public notice is presented. But I don't know that you're ready to schedule a date today, because it sounds like Mr. Parker is not available.
I'm good with that. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't adjourning before making that decision. Okay, with that, then we will, unless there's any other closing comments for the working group, Member Cohen?
Nope, no other comments. Let's wrap it up.
Okay, so we're adjourned, and we'll see you all. Well, it's virtually.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And sorry about the delay with all this tech.
Yeah, again, our apologies for the inconvenience of the tech.
Vice President Kim Myers.
Oh, it's okay. It's Kamala.
Kamala 57.
So since you can't say